Celina Hinojosa was born in Brownsville, Texas, and her sense of the place is very deep.
I have lived here the better part of my life, with the exception of going off to school. My family originally were 5, mother, father, sister, brother. Lost a brother in 1976. So I still have my one and only sister, and she's very important to me. When we lost my brother, the family became all the more close. We are very supportive of each other. We love each other immensely.
The artist can vividly recall her early childhood. These memories reveal her profound communion with nature.
When I think of beautiful places and beautiful feelings, I go back to the days that Dad was taking us out to the farms and ranches of friends that were tending to the land, farm workers. They lived very, very humbly. They were extremely poor, but very rich in their love for us. Their land was their wealth, and so Dad would take us out there. He taught us how to drive out there. He taught us how to fish from the resacas. So I was always surrounded by these beautiful crops. Even the farmland that has just recently been tilled was beautiful to me, because we were outdoors, we were in nature, could hear the wind in the trees, and all of these are ingrained in my memory banks.
Like so many artists, Celina felt compelled to create art from a tender age.
I would do just about everything with my hands, anything. I loved what I saw going on in the kitchen. Even that I saw as an art form. I had a chalkboard my parents gave me for Christmas very, very early on. I must have been about 4. And I would draw on that. But my favorite place to draw was under this old bougainvillea on the side of my house at Old Home. And I was just picking around in the dirt one day, and I found right close to the wall some little pieces of unusually shaped, what looked like chalk. I noticed that I could draw right away, and the ground was just so parched at that time. It's very, very warm in deep South Texas, and it was probably summertime, because I remember it being so hard that I could draw on the parched ground. And that's one of my earliest recollections of drawing.
Her first encounter with paint changed her life.
I found myself at a little place called the Purple Palette. Mrs. Yon sold jewelry, turquoise jewelry, and she was an artist herself, and she had this little display. It was quite plentiful, and she had some oil paints that I recognized, watercolors, and these new tubes of paint that I had never seen before. And I was just standing in front of it, feeling sad and thinking, I wish I could have some of those paints. I was completely lost in this wall of paints and brushes. Mrs. Yon came up behind me. She was a great big tall woman. I was quite small at the time. And she looked around and said, Celina, do you know what you're looking at? And I said, paints. And she said, would you like to paint? And I didn't answer, because I knew we couldn't afford the paints. Somehow or another, my mom bought me a whole set of paints that day. I don't know if they worked something out together, but I went home that day with my first set of paints, and I never stopped painting.
Celina has been a decoder, or interpreter, all her life. It is a skill she incorporates into her work.
I was the quiet child that was just constantly observing her world. And I remember sitting under the table and listening to the adults and understanding what they were saying. This is two years old, you know. They were speaking Spanish they were speaking in code, and I was decoding what they were saying.
Celina's skill at decoding, or recognizing symbolism, is central to her artistic vision, and she regularly inserts hidden meanings and messages into her work. She began doing this quite suddenly.
There was a terrible thunderstorm. I was painting away, having a great old time, and I got a phone call. It was bad news. A friend of mine had taken his life. It was a very dear friend of mine. And because that hit me so hard, for some reason I was compelled to document that moment. I said, you know something, things don't happen for just, it's not coincidental sometimes. I think that I find meaning behind a lot of things. I try to put meaning and try to put things into perspective for myself. And for me, that thunderstorm was Tim letting me know that he was checking out. And I decided to document that sentiment in a secret place in a painting. And I, in the tiniest letters in a tree line, I wrote, "Hello, it's me." And it was simply Tim saying, "Hello, it's me." That is me in the thunderstorm. Since then, in every painting I have placed a hidden message of sorts, whether it's something about the painting or something that's happening in my life.
A traumatic experience with music teachers and terrifying stage fright prompted Celina to pursue painting individually and at her own pace.
I painted at night when everybody went to sleep, and I would not finish until that composition was done. This is where my obsessiveness with completing projects and staying up late began, and relentless working and getting it right and training myself.
She kept to this method of private self-teaching until the last year of high school, when she received her first formal instruction.
I started painting, and I knew at that point that I would never stop painting. I had no training, painted myself, and it was all done at night. And the same exercise that I just explained to you was done all the time. I painted in private, and I set it out for viewing in the morning, but I couldn't be there for the first viewing. I would only listen to what they were saying.
The most tragic event in her life occurred when she was a young teen and her older brother Danny fell victim to border violence. She was able to deal with Danny's death through making art, cherishing her family and her memories of him, and relying on her faith.
When all of this occurred, it was such drama in my life, and the anger that set in was overwhelming, and I was very tempted to paint my anger out of me. And instead, I decided that would be more destructive in memorializing anger than it would be to concentrate on what Danny would have liked for me to concentrate. He was a huge inspiration. He said, no matter what you do, put your heart in it. He said, you're going to do fine. You're going to do well. I want you to be a good girl. He was always getting after us about being good girls. I said to myself when I decided on my subject matter, I'm going to paint what God has really meant for me to feel, and that is peace and love of family, love of nature. And this is the thing I think I most want to portray in my pieces.
Having mastered the fundamentals on her own, Celina chose to pursue a formal education that specialized in art. She attended Texas Southmost College and then went to the University of Texas, where she majored in commercial art and design.
And that's where the training in design and painting, life drawing, true life drawing, nudes, etc., I really enjoyed that. I really realized how important life drawing was. I still, to this day, I tell young kids, if you want to do it right, learn how to draw. If you can draw well, you can do just about anything.
Celina continued on and earned a master's degree at Texas A&I University at Kingsville, now part of the Texas A&M system. Throughout her college career, she was influenced and mentored by George Truon.
I think where I learned the most was here at TSC when I started learning to do life drawing under the direction of George Truon. He served originally as my instructor, then mentor, helped me make my college career decisions. After my studies and working there for a year, I came back here and he offered me a job. So then he became my colleague and my boss, and still was my mentor towards the end.
Truon was the first to appreciate Celina's stylistic and distinctive depiction of the human figure.
That original training at TSC was vital. It really was. He showed me that I was misproportioning my figures. I had a tendency to either caricature and make very round or elongate, you know. So I've just always done that, and he says you're going to have to control that here in life drawing, and that was my basis. You know, he gave me a great foundation, and gave me the incentive, and he gave me the courage to attempt UT.
Celina continued her study of the human figure after persuading her aunt to rent her a studio above the local cantina.
There was a little crack in the wall about this big, okay, just what fits inside my finger. And when I looked in, I realized I was looking into a world. And I decided one night late, after they closed the bar downstairs, at the time it was called Reina's Cantina, I decided to take my X-Acto knife and start carving it so that it would, you know, I could have a better view of what was going on downstairs, because I was noticing that every time a new group of people would come in, and they'd come in about every half hour, sometimes some people would stay there for a couple hours, so you would see dramas play out. I saw lots of things going on down there. And this is where I would put a little pad sometimes and sketch, and other times just simply watch, not to miss anything. And then later, in my calm, collected moment, I would sit and sketch.
Celina created what she considers her magnum opus, Ranchito Union, for her longtime patrons, Stephen and Elaine Heffelfinger, a ranching couple whom she felt connected with her and her work the moment they met.
Stephen was so connected with my work that he said, I want you to paint a very special painting for me. And we sat down and we talked about this painting that he called his dream painting. We talked about the elements, and his central figure had to be Emiliano Zapata. And I didn't ask the whys at first. I was just listening to the elements and the details of his needs, and composition would come later, just his dream elements. He said, I want there to be a Brahman bull, because we had one and it wasn't part of our livestock, it was a pet. And we talked about the roadrunner and the jackrabbit and the horned toad. He talked about other characters. He goes, I love Frida Kahlo's work, I love her story, I love St. Francis of Assisi. And he said these three people would be wonderful in a composition, but if it doesn't work out, the main person has to be Emiliano Zapata. He also told me he definitely wanted people crossing in the river, literally crossing in the river, as they do when they're trying to come into the United States.
Celina helps others interpret her work by sharing some of the symbolism she used in this enchanting piece.
I always throw three light things, usually in the background, that's for me symbolic of the Holy Trinity, and for me kind of I ask for a blessing before I get started on any painting, so I remembered his crossers in the river. So I decided to put three sombreroed men crossing in the river, way off in the distance.
In a presentation given in 2005 at Arizona State University, Celina described her painstaking, layered approach to completing her work. Only after complex preparation does she execute the final acrylic painting using the dry brush technique.
Here is a good example of my work strategy. I've planned Gallero 1 here to be accompanied by Gallero 2, here seen in its sketch form, which goes to hard line drawing, followed by a color study, which then goes, of course, to canvas for final execution. Future Gallero 3 will be flanked by Galleros 1 and 2 at some future date, here seen in its sketch stage, and here in its triptych presentation.
In recent years, Celina has found camaraderie at San Antonio's Gaista complex.
Before I wound up back here in Brownsville these last 2.5 years, I had met the Gaistas, and that was where I can't tell you, they were the greatest gift that I could have received, because I had always desired an art community, friends, people who understood who I was, what I was doing, because here in Brownsville there was very little of it. There were people who recognized the talent and knew they always claimed I was going to do great things. It was hard to live up to, so it made me work even harder. But there weren't artists at that time that I could, mix with and that would understand me. So that's when I started, when I headed out that way. In the end, I found the Gaistas, and I think I found my niche. And they're good friends today, and we help each other. We talk about art, and we all learn from each other.